Sarah Martinez stepped onto Flight 447 with the same casual confidence she had shown thousands of times before. To the boarding passengers, she appeared to be just another tourist heading to Miami for vacation. Her worn backpack contained the typical items any traveler might carry: a guidebook, sunscreen, and a camera. But hidden beneath her relaxed demeanor and tourist attire lay a secret that even her closest friends didn't know. The middle-aged woman had spent the last 15 years working as a commercial airline pilot for a major European carrier. She had logged over 12,000 flight hours, navigating through storms, mechanical failures, and emergency situations that would terrify most people. Sarah had earned her captain's wings through years of dedication, but today she was flying as a passenger, taking a well-deserved break from the cockpit. As she settled into seat 23B, Sarah noticed the nervous energy of her fellow passengers. Flight 447 was packed to capacity with 320 souls aboard, including families returning from vacation, business travelers, and other tourists like herself. Children chattered excitedly about their upcoming adventures, while their parents checked and rechecked their boarding passes. The elderly couple in front of her shared stories about visiting their grandchildren, their faces glowing with anticipation. Captain James Mitchell, a veteran pilot with 22 years of experience, made his routine pre-flight announcement. His voice was steady and professional as he informed passengers about their flight path, expected turbulence, and arrival time. First Officer Lisa Chen, younger but equally skilled, completed her safety checks with practiced efficiency. The crew had flown together dozens of times and trusted each other completely. Sarah found herself unconsciously evaluating the takeoff procedure as the massive aircraft lifted off the runway. Old habits died hard, and despite being off duty, her pilot instincts remained sharp. She noted the smooth acceleration, the perfect rotation angle, and the steady climb rate. Everything appeared normal as they ascended through the clouds toward Yai, their cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The first hour of the flight passed peacefully. Passengers settled into their routines, some reading, others watching movies on their personal devices, and many simply gazing out the windows at the vast expanse of ocean below. Flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisles, serving drinks and snacks while maintaining their professional smiles. The atmosphere was relaxed and comfortable, exactly what everyone expected from a routine commercial flight. Sarah accepted a coffee from the flight attendant and opened her novel, trying to lose herself in the story, but her trained ears couldn't help but monitor the subtle sounds of the aircraft. The steady hum of the engines, the gentle whoosh of the air conditioning system, and the occasional creak of the cabin structure were all familiar melodies to her, experienced senses. Nobody on board suspected that this ordinary-looking tourist possessed the skills and knowledge that would soon become their lifeline. The other passengers saw only a quiet woman enjoying her vacation, unaware that fate had placed exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. As the aircraft continued its journey over the Atlantic, Sarah couldn't shake a growing feeling of unease. Something in the engine's rhythm seemed slightly off, though so subtle that only someone with her extensive experience might notice. She told herself it was probably nothing, just her pilot's paranoia working overtime during her vacation. After all, she was supposed to be relaxing, not analyzing every sound the aircraft made. The captain's next announcement would shatter the peaceful atmosphere and transform this routine flight into a test of human courage, skill, and survival. In the cockpit, warning lights had begun to flicker, and Captain Mitchell was about to face the most challenging situation of his career. The 320 passengers aboard Flight 447 had no idea that their lives would soon depend on the quick thinking and expertise of the mysterious tourist sitting quietly in seat 23B. The stage was set for an extraordinary demonstration of human resilience and the power of hidden talents revealed in moments of crisis. What began as an ordinary flight would become a story of heroism, teamwork, and the incredible capacity of people to rise above impossible circumstances when lives hang in the balance. The first sign of trouble came as a subtle vibration that most passengers dismissed as normal turbulence. Sarah Martinez, however, immediately recognized the irregular pattern. Her years of experience told her this wasn't atmospheric disturbance. Something was wrong with the aircraft itself. She set down her coffee cup and listened intently, her trained senses picking up variations in engine performance that others couldn't detect. In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell's attention was drawn to an amber warning light on the instrument panel. The left engine's oil pressure was dropping steadily, and the temperature readings were climbing beyond normal parameters. First Officer Chen quickly ran through the emergency checklist, her fingers dancing across switches and buttons with practiced precision. Both pilots maintained their composure, but the gravity of the situation was becoming clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Mitchell's voice crackled over the intercom, noticeably more tense than before. "We're experiencing a minor technical issue, and will need to reduce our altitude as a precautionary measure. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened while we address this situation." The word minor did little to calm the growing anxiety among passengers. Parents pulled their children closer, business travelers stopped typing on their laptops, and conversations dropped to worried whispers. The elderly couple in front of Sarah clutched each other's hands, their earlier excitement replaced by fear. Even the most seasoned travelers could sense that something serious was happening. Sarah's pilot instincts kicked into high gear. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, moving toward the front of the cabin despite the seatbelt sign being illuminated. Her movement caught the attention of a flight attendant, who politely but firmly asked her to return to her seat. Sarah's response surprised everyone within earshot. "I'm a commercial airline captain with over 12,000 flight hours," she said quietly but authoritatively. "I need to speak with your flight crew immediately." The flight attendant's expression changed instantly from polite insistence to cautious hope. She quickly escorted Sarah toward the cockpit, navigating through the narrow aisle as the aircraft continued to descend. Other passengers watched curiously, wondering who this mysterious woman was and why she was being given special treatment during an emergency. Meanwhile, the situation in the cockpit was deteriorating rapidly. The left engine's oil pressure had dropped to critical levels and metal shavings were appearing in the oil system, clear signs of catastrophic internal damage. Captain Mitchell made the difficult decision to shut down the failing engine before it could cause a fire or explosion. The aircraft shuddered as the engine powered down, leaving them dependent on a single functioning engine. Flying on one engine was possible, but it significantly reduced their options. The remaining engine was working harder to maintain altitude and speed, putting additional stress on the entire propulsion system. Their fuel consumption increased dramatically, and their ability to reach the nearest airport became questionable. The mathematics of flight were working against them with each passing minute. First Officer Chen contacted air traffic control, declaring a formal emergency and requesting immediate clearance to the closest suitable airport. The controller's calm professionalism helped maintain focus as they calculated distances, fuel requirements, and weather conditions. Every decision now carried life or death consequences for the 320 people aboard. The flight attendant knocked on the cockpit door, announcing that a passenger claimed to be an experienced pilot and wanted to assist. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Chen exchanged glances, weighing their options. Standard protocol discouraged allowing passengers into the cockpit during emergencies, but their situation was far from standard. They needed every advantage they could get. Sarah entered the cockpit and quickly assessed the situation. Her eyes scanned the instrument panels, taking in the engine parameters, fuel levels, and navigation displays. Within seconds, she understood the severity of their predicament. The crew briefed her on their current status, backup plans, and available options. Her experience with similar aircraft types made her an invaluable addition to their decision-making process. "We have about 40 minutes of fuel remaining at current consumption rates," Sarah calculated aloud. "The nearest suitable airport is 35 minutes away in ideal conditions, but we'll need to account for approach procedures and possible delays. It's going to be extremely close." The three pilots worked together, combining their expertise to find solutions that none of them might have discovered alone. Sarah's fresh perspective and extensive experience with emergency procedures provided new options for managing their crisis. The collaboration between strangers, united by their shared knowledge and commitment to saving lives, demonstrated the best of human cooperation under pressure. As they continued their emergency descent, passengers in the cabin remained largely unaware of how precarious their situation had become. The mysterious tourist from seat 23B was now their hidden lifeline, working alongside the official crew to navigate one of the most dangerous scenarios in commercial aviation. Inside the cramped cockpit, 3 experienced pilots worked with intense focus as their aircraft continued its emergency descent. Sarah Martinez had quickly established her credibility by identifying critical system failures that the crew hadn't yet noticed. Her sharp eye caught a hydraulic pressure warning that was masked by more urgent alarms, potentially preventing a complete loss of flight control systems later in their emergency. Captain Mitchell found himself grateful for Sarah's presence despite the unusual circumstances. Her calm demeanor and methodical approach to problem-solving provided a stabilizing influence during the most stressful situation of his career. First Officer Chen appreciated having another set of trained eyes reviewing their procedures and calculations. Together, they formed an impromptu team united by their shared expertise and determination to save every life aboard. "The weather at our alternate airport is deteriorating," Chen reported, monitoring radio communications with air traffic control. "Visibility is dropping due to fog, and crosswinds are increasing. We'll be landing at the absolute limits of what's safe in these conditions." Sarah studied the weather reports and airport approach charts, her mind calculating approach angles, minimum visibility requirements, and wind corrections. Her experience flying in challenging European weather conditions proved invaluable as they planned their emergency landing strategy. Every detail mattered when operating with such narrow margins for error. "I've landed at this airport before in similar conditions," Sarah informed the crew. "There's a crosswind technique that works well for this runway configuration. If you'll permit me, I can walk you through the approach parameters that have worked in my experience." The collaboration between the 3 pilots represented something beautiful about human nature. The willingness to set aside protocols, egos, and hierarchies when lives were at stake. Mitchell and Chen listened intently as Sarah shared her knowledge, incorporating her suggestions into their emergency procedures. Her insights about wind patterns, runway characteristics, and approach techniques could make the difference between a successful landing and catastrophe. Back in the passenger cabin, flight attendants worked to keep travelers calm while preparing for the emergency landing. They demonstrated brace positions, reviewed evacuation procedures, and answered questions with reassuring professionalism. Many passengers noticed the increased activity and serious expressions of the crew members, understanding that their situation was more serious than initially presented. The family in row 15, parents with 2 young children, struggled to explain the situation without causing panic. Their 8-year-old daughter asked why the airplane was shaking, while their 5-year-old son slept peacefully, unaware of the danger surrounding him. Passengers nearby offered quiet words of encouragement and helped distract the children with games and stories. In the cockpit, fuel calculations showed they would arrive at their destination airport with less than 10 minutes of fuel remaining, an extremely tight margin that left no room for missed approaches or delays. The single functioning engine was performing well, but the additional workload was pushing it toward its operational limits. Any further complications could force them to attempt an emergency landing at sea. Sarah's experience with fuel management proved crucial as they optimized their descent profile and approach speed. Her knowledge of engine performance characteristics helped them extract maximum efficiency from their remaining power plant. She suggested minor adjustments to their flight path that could save precious fuel without compromising safety margins. "Air traffic control is clearing all other aircraft from our path," Chen reported. "Emergency services are standing by at the airport, including fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue teams. They're treating this as a full-scale emergency response." The gravity of their situation became even more apparent as they received priority handling from everyone involved in air traffic management. Controllers at multiple facilities coordinated to provide them with the most direct route possible, while weather services provided updated wind and visibility reports every few minutes. The entire aviation system was mobilizing to support their emergency landing attempt. Sarah found herself thinking about the 320 people depending on their decisions. Each passenger had families, dreams, and responsibilities waiting for them on the ground. The elderly couple she had observed earlier, the young families, the business travelers, all of their lives hung in the balance as the aircraft continued its descent toward an uncertain outcome. 15 minutes to touchdown, Captain Mitchell announced over the intercom. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for emergency landing procedures. The mysterious tourist who had boarded as just another passenger had revealed herself to be exactly what they needed most. An experienced pilot with the knowledge and skills to help guide 320 souls safely back to Earth. Her hidden expertise had transformed her from a casual observer into a critical member of the emergency response team, proving that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. The tension in the cockpit reached its peak as Flight 447 approached its final descent phase. With only 8 minutes of fuel remaining, every second counted in their race against time. Sarah Martinez monitored the fuel flow indicators while Captain Mitchell and First Officer Chen managed the approach procedures. The collaboration between the three pilots had become seamless, each person contributing their expertise to maximize their chances of success. Visibility at the airport has dropped to minimums, Chen reported, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. We'll be landing with barely adequate visual references. The fog bank is moving in faster than predicted. Sarah's experience with low visibility approaches in European airports proved invaluable as she helped refine their instrument approach procedures. She knew that in these conditions, they would have only one chance to land successfully. A missed approach would mean running out of fuel before they could attempt another landing, forcing them into an emergency water landing with little hope of passenger survival. The aircraft descended through thick cloud cover, its instruments providing the only reliable navigation references. Outside the cockpit windows, the world had disappeared into a gray void that offered no visual clues about their position or altitude. The pilots relied entirely on their training, instruments, and mutual trust as they guided the massive aircraft toward the invisible runway below. In the passenger cabin, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Flight attendants moved through the aisles one final time, ensuring that everyone was properly secured for the emergency landing. Passengers gripped their armrests, whispered prayers, and tried to comfort one another as the aircraft continued its descent through the turbulent air. The mother in row 15 held her sleeping son close while her daughter clutched a stuffed animal, sensing the adult's anxiety even without understanding its cause. 3 minutes to touchdown, Mitchell announced to the cabin. Brace for impact landing. Flight attendants, take your emergency positions. The words sent a chill through every passenger, confirming their worst fears about the severity of their situation. Some people began crying quietly, while others sat in determined silence. The elderly couple Sarah had noticed during boarding held hands tightly, their weathered faces showing both fear and acceptance. Throughout the cabin, strangers reached out to comfort one another, demonstrating the profound human connections that emerge during moments of shared crisis. Sarah's attention was focused entirely on the instrument displays as they broke through the cloud layer at 500 feet above the ground. The runway lights appeared through the fog like distant stars, providing their first visual confirmation that they were aligned correctly for landing. Her heart raced as she realized how close they had come to missing their target in the poor visibility conditions. Runway in sight, Chen called out, relief evident in her voice. Approach looks good. Fuel showing 3 minutes remaining. The final approach required absolute precision, with no margin for error. Sarah helped calculate wind corrections and approach speeds while the crew executed the most critical landing of their careers. The crosswinds she had warned them about were pushing the aircraft sideways, requiring constant corrections to maintain proper alignment with the runway centerline. At 100 feet above the ground, the aircraft encountered severe wind shear that threatened to slam them into the runway prematurely. Captain Mitchell fought the controls while Sarah called out airspeed and altitude readings. First Officer Chen managed the engine power settings, trying to maintain just enough thrust to control their descent without overstraining their single-functioning engine. 50 feet, 40, 30. Sarah counted down their altitude as the runway rose to meet them. The landing would be harder than normal due to their single-engine configuration and the gusty wind conditions, but they had no choice but to commit to the approach. Any hesitation now would be fatal for everyone aboard. The aircraft touched down with a jarring impact that sent a shudder through the entire structure. Passengers gasped, and some screamed as the pilots fought to maintain control during the landing roll. The brakes were applied with maximum force, generating clouds of smoke from the overheated wheels as they tried to stop the heavy aircraft before running out of runway. Emergency vehicles raced alongside the aircraft as it slowed, their flashing lights visible through the fog. Fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue teams were positioned and ready to respond to any emergency that might develop during the landing sequence. The airport had been transformed into a massive emergency response operation, focused entirely on saving the lives of Flight 447's passengers and crew. As the aircraft finally came to a complete stop, a moment of stunned silence filled both the cockpit and passenger cabin. They had defied the odds, overcome mechanical failure, and survived an emergency landing in dangerous weather conditions. The mysterious tourist from seat 23B had played a crucial role in saving 320 lives, her hidden expertise proving to be exactly what they needed when everything seemed impossible. The immediate aftermath of the emergency landing brought a mixture of relief, confusion, and organized chaos as passengers and crew processed what they had just survived. Flight 447 sat motionless on the fog-shrouded runway, surrounded by emergency vehicles whose flashing lights created an eerie glow in the thick mist. Inside the aircraft, 320 people slowly began to realize that they had cheated death through a combination of skill, luck, and extraordinary teamwork. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled over the intercom one final time, his words carrying emotions that he had kept carefully controlled during the crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to safety. We have successfully completed an emergency landing and you are all safe. Please remain seated while emergency personnel assess our situation and prepare for evacuation procedures." In the cockpit, Sarah Martinez quietly gathered her belongings, preparing to return to her passenger seat, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Her modest demeanor contrasted sharply with the magnitude of her contribution to their survival. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Chen, however, weren't about to let her disappear without recognition. "Sarah, what you did today saved lives," Mitchell said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Your expertise, your calm presence, and your willingness to help made the difference between success and tragedy. I've been flying for over 20 years, and I've never experienced teamwork like what we had in this cockpit." First Officer Chen nodded in agreement, adding, "The fuel calculations you helped with, the approach techniques you shared, the way you spotted that hydraulic problem, any one of those contributions could have been the thing that saved us all. You're a hero, whether you want to admit it or not." Sarah accepted their thanks with characteristic humility, explaining that she had simply done what any experienced pilot would do in similar circumstances. Her matter-of-fact attitude about her heroic actions would become one of the most memorable aspects of the entire emergency for those who witnessed it. She had revealed extraordinary skills when they were needed most, then quietly prepared to fade back into anonymity. The evacuation process began with mechanical precision as flight attendants guided passengers toward the emergency exits. The slides deployed properly despite the aircraft's hard landing, allowing people to escape quickly and safely onto the wet runway surface. Emergency responders helped passengers move away from the aircraft and toward waiting buses that would transport them to the terminal building. Among the evacuees, stories began to emerge about the mysterious woman who had left her seat during the emergency. Passengers who had observed her conversation with the flight attendant, her movement toward the cockpit, and her confident demeanor began to piece together the reality that someone extraordinary had been traveling among them. Word spread quickly that a pilot had been aboard as a passenger and had helped save their lives. The family from row 15 learned about Sarah's role while waiting in the terminal. The mother approached her with tears in her eyes, carrying her young son who was finally awake and alert. "My children are alive because of what you did," she said simply. "I don't know how to thank someone for giving your family their future back." Similar scenes played out throughout the terminal as passengers realized the full extent of Sarah's contribution to their survival. The elderly couple she had watched during boarding made their way over to express their gratitude, their faces glowing with appreciation for the stranger who had helped ensure they would see their grandchildren again. Business travelers, vacation families, and fellow tourists all wanted to thank the woman, whose hidden skills had saved their lives. Media representatives began arriving at the airport as word of the dramatic emergency landing spread through news networks. The story of Flight 447's survival against overwhelming odds captured public attention, but the focus quickly shifted to the mysterious passenger whose expertise had made the difference. Reporters searched for details about the woman pilot who had emerged from anonymity to help save 320 lives. Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the attention and praise being directed toward her. She had always been a private person who preferred to let her actions speak louder than words. The idea of becoming a public figure or media sensation was deeply uncomfortable for someone who had spent her career focused on safety and professionalism rather than recognition and fame. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Chen spoke to investigators and reporters, making sure that Sarah's contributions were properly documented and recognized. They insisted that the successful outcome had been a team effort, but they were clear about the crucial role played by the passenger who had volunteered her expertise during their darkest moment. Airport officials and airline representatives began the complex process of investigating the engine failure, arranging accommodations for stranded passengers, and coordinating with insurance companies and government agencies. The aircraft itself would require extensive analysis to determine the exact cause of the mechanical failure and ensure that similar incidents could be prevented in the future. As the immediate crisis faded into logistical challenges and bureaucratic procedures, the human story of courage, cooperation, and hidden heroism began to take center stage. Sarah Martinez had boarded Flight 447 as an anonymous tourist seeking a quiet vacation, but she would leave as a symbol of how ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when circumstances demand their very best efforts. 6 months after the emergency landing of Flight 447, the story continued to resonate around the world, inspiring changes in aviation safety protocols and touching the lives of people who had never set foot on an airplane. Sarah Martinez had reluctantly become a symbol of hidden heroism and the extraordinary potential that exists within ordinary individuals when they are called upon to rise above normal circumstances. The aviation industry implemented new procedures based on lessons learned from Flight 447's emergency. Airlines began developing protocols for identifying off-duty pilots among passengers during crisis situations, recognizing that these hidden resources could provide invaluable assistance to flight crews. Sarah's contributions had demonstrated the value of collaboration and fresh perspectives during high-stress emergency scenarios. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Chen both received commendations for their professional handling of the emergency, but they consistently emphasized that their success had been made possible by the unexpected assistance of their passenger colleague. Mitchell later said in interviews that the experience had changed his perspective on teamwork and reminded him that expertise could be found in the most unlikely places. The 320 passengers who had survived Flight 447 formed lasting connections with one another, united by their shared experience of mortality and miraculous survival. Many of them stayed in contact through social media groups and annual reunion gatherings, celebrating not just their survival, but the demonstration of human cooperation they had witnessed during their darkest hour. Sarah herself struggled with the attention her actions had generated. She had always been motivated by duty and professionalism rather than recognition, finding it difficult to accept praise for doing what she considered to be her responsibility as a trained pilot. The media attention gradually decreased, allowing her to return to her normal routine, but the impact of her actions continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. The young family from Row 15 sent Sarah regular updates about their children's lives, sharing photos and stories about school achievements, birthdays, and family milestones. The mother often reminded Sarah that every moment of joy they experienced existed because of her willingness to help during the emergency. These personal connections proved more meaningful to Sarah than any official recognition or public accolades. Aviation. Colleges and training programs began using Flight 447 as a case study, teaching future pilots about crisis management, teamwork, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. Sarah was occasionally invited to speak at these institutions, though she preferred to focus on technical aspects of emergency procedures rather than her personal role in the incident. The elderly couple Sarah had observed during boarding became two of her closest friends despite the unlikely circumstances of their first meeting. They represented the kind of genuine human connection that can emerge from shared experiences of vulnerability and mutual dependence. Their friendship reminded Sarah that heroism often creates bonds that extend far beyond the moment of crisis itself. Airlines began encouraging their off-duty crew members to identify themselves during flights, creating informal networks of expertise that could be activated during emergencies. This cultural shift toward collaboration and resource sharing was directly inspired by Sarah's example and the successful outcome of Flight 447's crisis management approach. The investigation into the engine failure revealed manufacturing defects that had gone undetected during routine maintenance procedures. Sarah's quick identification of secondary system problems during the emergency had prevented what could have been an even more catastrophic situation. Her technical knowledge and observational skills had quite literally meant the difference between a successful emergency landing and complete disaster. Years later, Sarah continued to fly as a commercial pilot, though she found herself more aware of the passengers in the cabin and the hidden stories, skills, and potential that each person carried with them. She realized that her experience on Flight 447 had taught her as much about human nature as it had about emergency procedures and crisis management. The story of Flight 447 became a reminder that heroism doesn't always announce itself with fanfare and recognition. Sometimes the most crucial contributions come from people who happen to be in the right place at the right time, armed with the right knowledge and the willingness to act when action is desperately needed. Sarah Martinez had embodied this quiet form of heroism, proving that extraordinary individuals often walk among us disguised as ordinary passengers. The 320 souls who owed their lives to the collaboration between Sarah and the flight crew went on to live full lives, raise families, build careers, and contribute to their communities in countless ways. Each of their continuing stories represented a victory over the odds and a testament to what becomes possible when people work together in service of something larger than themselves. In the end, the true measure of Sarah's heroism wasn't found in the headlines or commendations, but in the thousands of moments of life that continued to unfold for the people she helped save. Birthday celebrations, graduations, weddings, and quiet family dinners that might never have happened without her courage to step forward when her skills were needed most.